Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to get a first-hand account about what went on in Penn State and then what should happen to change some of Pennsylvania's laws regarding reporting of sexual abuse. And then, of course, it's time for our all-star panel. They will weigh in on all things, what, legislatively? We'll be back after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. All right, we got an action-packed, action-filled program. Joining me, as often is the case, is Laura Olson from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're going to get into what proposals are being bandied about the state legislature in light of the Penn State sexual abuse scandal. But she was pepper sprayed, weren't you?
I was out on the streets in State College on Wednesday night when all of these students took to the streets as soon as the press conference was over, saying that Joe Paterno and Graham Spanier, the longtime football coach and president of the university, were out. There were thousands of students out on the street.
And you were covering it?
Yeah, most of it was fairly peaceful. Most of it was just folks gawking and wondering what was going on. But there were some spots that got fairly angry, and lots of cheers, lots of people jumping on light poles and shaking them, and a news van from, I believe, one of the Altoona or Johnstown stations that got toppled.
Got turned. I saw that. And how did you get pepper sprayed?
Well, once the news van turned over, the police weren't really excited
and you were
about
that
this
close.
anymore.
You were right there covering it.
I got up there to get a shot with my camera phone, and then as soon as I was running back, that's when the cops were like, "Okay, we've had enough of this. Let's calm everyone down. Let's move on."
When you became a reporter, you didn't think it was going to get that dangerous, did you?
I think it's kind of like a journalism merit badge.
Merit badge, okay. All right, look, in the wake of this horrific scandal up there, there's now aspects of our state law requiring reporting of sexual abuse. I've read stuff about where people who've dealt with the law say it's confusing, it's contradictory, who should do what when. All of that is now about to be thrashed out in the legislature. Talk about some of the big items on the table.
Yeah, to someone who hasn't looked at this, the mandatory reporting law is a little confusing because someone like the graduate assistant who supposedly witnessed an incident, he was required to tell someone higher up in his organization. And there's even some more ambiguity about whether the law applies to higher ed versus the high schools or the middle schools, and how those educators are involved. And so there's been a really big call in the legislature to change who has to report to law enforcement or to child protective services.
And the consensus seems, now correct me if I'm wrong, that instead of being employer-based, it may go to everyone has a responsibility. Is that one of the...
Or if you're someone who sees something...
You see something, regardless.
Exactly, to kind of take out that middleman of feeding up the food chain. Because there has been some concerns about false reporting, and I believe that's why this law was put in place the way it was to try and ensure that the incidents that do move forward are actual, incidents that need to be investigated.
Now, are these like... apparently the two chambers are going to get together, the House and the Senate. They're going to form a joint is that
exactly? There's been a bunch of different proposals out there trying to respond to this, and the legislature said we're going to put together folks from the House and the Senate from both parties and some folks from outside the legislature to take a really long look at what's going on with our child abuse laws, what we need to fix, and where those problems are. They're going to report back probably sometime early next year. They're going to try and put this together before they leave at the end of December.
Okay, well, look, I want to thank you for the great update. Of course, we'll have you and your colleagues that cover the Capitol back on to this program to follow this very carefully. Laura Olson, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. All right, coming up, our all-star panel. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by ReconnectPA.org, supporting a comprehensive transportation funding solution, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. It's All-Star Panel time. Joining me, as always, on the All-Star Panel is Gene Barr. He's now president of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Congratulations, Gene. Sitting next to him is Jim Redmond, Senior VP with the Hospital and Healthsystem Association. And, of course, to my right is Fred Anton, the CEO of Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. All right, we have this big agenda: Marcellus Shale, transportation funding, sell the liquor stores, education reform. Fred, we are now into almost the end of the fall session. Why so tough to get this done?
Well, there are legitimate differences within the Republican Party between the governor and the branches of the legislature. And the issue really that is this week been in the forefront is the Marcellus Shale question. And there's a sharp division between the House and the Senate over what the amount of the impact fee or tax should be. The House wants it to be 1%, and the Senate wants it to be 3%.
But back on your other point, and then we'll turn to these other guys. I mean, look, we got a big state. It's rural, it's urban, it's suburban. We've got, you know, this is not no derogatory statement about it. This isn't Delaware.
No, this is not Delaware. And on all these major issues, whether it be school reform and charter schools, whether it be the liquor stores, or whether it be Marcellus Shale, there are different views within the Republican Party based on geography and other issues.
And as Meryl Streep might have put it, it's complicated. Go ahead, Gene.
Yeah, it is complicated. Here with, for example, Marcellus, because I think we agree that there are probably a couple things that are likely to get done here in the fall. Marcellus being one, education, and we support education reform. But Marcellus, you got this brand, relatively new industry coming in with legitimate concerns, as Fred points out, over tax levels and environmental protections and, you know, et cetera. And the reality is that in certain cases, because of the uncertainty, because of what other states are doing, we've already lost a few rigs out of this Commonwealth, gone to other states because they've kind of pulled together their strategy a little quicker than we have.
Before I turn to Jim, look, there's another element here. I mean, it seems like you got where the drilling is going on, and the folks who represent, lawmakers who represent, you know, communities affected directly by drilling. Then you go to other parts of the state where there isn't any. So you even have Republicans, am I right or wrong?
Well, you do.
Who have different, you know, based on the interest of their constituents, right?
Yeah, there is some of that, but part of that is understanding that just because you don't see a drilling rig out your back door doesn't mean that you don't see benefits. People are seeing benefits of lower natural gas prices. We were down in Lancaster County doing a forum, and we had one of the people engage with Marcellus who said, hey, last year we bought 75 brand new pickup trucks from a Lancaster County dealer. So whether you see them or not, the benefits of lower natural gas and jobs are all through PA.
Yeah, well, you know, the surveys have pretty much shown that, you know, the voters actually have pretty high respect for the industry. There's not a problem. They do want environmental protections there.
Absolutely.
And there's a big argument over what that means. And, you know, I know that your organization is not big about taxes, but most voters are okay with that.
But you got to think about whatever rate you're going to put on these companies, combining that with what is the highest corporate net income tax rate in the United States. So let's keep that in mind.
One other thing, Jim, let's turn to you. Not huge issues with regard to health care on the table, but, and this is a big but, insurance exchanges, I mean, we're going to have to deal with some enormous health care issues before this legislative session is over. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and I see those being a spring of 2012, maybe even the fall of 2012 kind of issue. But there are a series of things that the Commonwealth needs to do in order to implement the Federal Health Care Reform Act, and you'll see those developed in 2012.
All right, we're going to run to a break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up on some of these important issues. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Healthsystem Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program with the All-Star panel. All right, Marcellus Shale, transportation, funding, sell the liquor stores, education reform. Fred, Anton, what gets done before they break for the holidays?
Well, I think the issue that is most mature and that is had most legislative action is action on the Marcellus Shale.
So you think that will get done and the governor will ultimately sign something?
I don't know whether it will get done. I don't know whether anything will get done because there are only a few House and Senate days scheduled. Very few scheduled. Less
good
than.
Point.
They're down to, in the House, I believe, less than 9, and in the Senate, they're less than 12.
Some could say they're part-time. No, hey, go ahead. You don't have to answer to that one.
But the next issue, at least that the governor is trying to call attention to, is education reform. This week in the Capitol, they had dueling presentations on education. Corbett was touting his education reform plans, and former Governor Rendell was up.
He weighed in.
He weighed in with the opposition.
All right, turn to Eugene Barr.
I think
you got these big four. What gets done before they break?
I told people before the session started I'd be shocked if Marcellus didn't get done. I'll be surprised if Marcellus doesn't get done. I think it will. I think it will, and I think something gets signed because the industry wants the certainty, and I think there's a desire to put this behind them. I think something gets done on education. Teacher evaluations probably the most likely. They're going to look at vouchers. I think the other things are a spring issue. Spring issues.
Jim Redmond, you weigh in. So we got maybe education. Fred's on Marcellus Shale. You say maybe 2 things. Yeah. What do you think?
Redistricting has to get done.
Well, hold on.
We forgot that one.
No, we didn't. But we're going to come back to that in the next session. But of the big four, yeah, they have. Well, we'll get into that. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not close to all of those issues, but it would appear to be.
You pay attention to this.
But the impact fee seems to be closest to getting to the governor's
impact fee. So that would be Marcellus Shale. How about vouchers, education reform?
I have questions that they'll get there.
All right. Now, I want to hold off redistricting. It's huge. It's important. Let's go to this. Ultimately, of the big four, Jim Redmond, what do they get done? Shale, transportation funding, sell the liquor stores, education reform. Ultimately.
Marcellus Shale and education reform toward, you're talking about this session in 12?
Yep, yeah, you got
those 2 issues.
Gene Barr, no transportation funding, it's popular, it's a big issue.
It's so necessary, you want to believe something's going to get done. It's tough with the no tax side that's out there because we don't get the kind of dollars in without taxes. We're going to have to find a way of doing that. On the privatization, you know what? 48 other states have figured out how to make this work. Let's make it work. Let's make it work.
You know what's fascinating about that, Fred? In a Franklin Marshall College poll that I did, people favor it. Overwhelmingly sell the liquor stores. But you know what? There's no passion.
There's no passion.
There's no passion, like, you know. I mean, is that the problem?
Everyone's for it, or an overwhelming majority are for it, but they're not for it with any real interest.
Yeah,
and part of it isn't comprehensive reform. If you tell those people that they aren't going to be able to buy beer in the convenience stores, then they wouldn't be for it as much as they are.
I think Fred hit on the reason. It's the beer stuff. It's because it's not comprehensive. And we're not doing it in total. It's kind of like, yeah, it'd be nice, but. And I'll tell you why. That's why many businesses aren't really up over this, because beer is one of the things that they'd really like to be able to do from a customer convenience.
The numbers. The numbers don't necessarily add up. The Commonwealth is too dependent upon the liquor store system to support the activities of the general fund.
They haven't come forward with a compelling enough plan which they can explain that handles the fiscal aspects of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big drinker. I don't do a lot to go to the liquor. It doesn't. I never thought much about it. And then there's this combination where you got a lot of rural lawmakers, Republicans, who would be for privatization in theory, but who run into the problem where they're concerned about, right down your alley, the health care and the social consequences of expanding it. Is that a legitimate, I mean, but Gene says every other, we got 48 states that do it. Now, is it
Hey, even in Utah, you can buy beer Or beer in the...
It's not a real temperance issue.
Yeah.
It really is not. There's not going to be less alcohol abuse if there are state stores privatized, in my opinion.
I mean, the state system has improved its image and services.
You know what? He's hit on a big point.
But you know why they did?
He's hit on a big
Why
point.
did they? Because of the threat of competition. More than anything else, the threat of competition has
But
driven
that
them
mitigates against the passage.
mitigates
because
against
now,
it, but-
now people say, well, I can go...
That's right. But if that threat goes away, what happens to the state stores? Are they continue to innovate and improve? And my suspicion is they won't. We really need to figure this out. And when you look at the amount of money that's raised in terms of gross revenue, the amount delivered back to the state isn't all that great based on the study that came out.
Right.
You also got a lot of these rural liquor stores that aren't open full time. They're open maybe 2-3 days a week.
Yeah.
So I think if you turn it in the private sector, along with the fact that this whole argument about enforcement, right now the state police will tell you they don't do stings at state stores. So I would argue that somebody who's put hundreds of thousands, if not more, into a private enterprise has a huge stake in making sure they comply with the law.
All right, we're going to a break. We're going to talk about redistricting, and we got legislative state lawmakers, and then we got the big one coming up, congressional redistricting. All of that following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. All right, another big topic that, you know, the eyes sort of glaze over, Jim Redmond, when we talk about redrawing boundary lines. The State Reapportionment Commission, Legislative Reapportionment Commission has gotten the State House and State Senate, all to a lot of dismay by Republicans and Democrats. We also have congressional reapportionment or redistricting going on. That yet to be done. So weigh in, where does all this go?
Well, the state house seats, all 203 and the 50 senatorial districts, has to get done by the end of November.
Right.
There's a public hearing coming up. The plan is
November
out there.
18th, yeah.
And I think that there will be some tweaks to that plan, but for the most part, it'll remain the same. The big issue is the shift in population from west to east. And that creates some disruptions and changes in the districts throughout the state.
Yeah, some of that is, I mean, you know, the Senator Piccola's district, a central Pennsylvania district, by the way, South Central, in 4 or 5 counties, 5 counties actually, in and around Dauphin and Lebanon and Perry. I won't go through all of them. I'll miss one, York, Cumberland. Very controversial, but there's controversies over a number of them.
How many redistrictings have you been through that haven't been controversial? Look, there's always a seat that moves here, and you figure out where you're going to put it, where you're going to drop this, and who's going to win and who's going to lose.
Right.
You're always going to have that. You're going to try and attempt to draw them as fairly as you can,
but we all know what the but means. Incumbent protection, right, Fred?
Absolutely.
And both parties do it. Let's be honest about this, right? It's not just...
No, wait a second. Now, take the Congress particularly. There are now 12 Republican congressmen and 6 Democrats.
Seven
Democrats.
There will be
they will be 6.
Fred was moving ahead.
He was going in that direction.
Wait a second. Now, if I were in charge of the Republican Party, my goal would be, with a divided state between Republicans and Democrats, to make those 12 seats permanent Republican seats. Now, the way you do that is you take the Democratic voters out of those seats and pack them in to the 6 seats that the Democrats hold.
They might do that. No? What do you think?
I don't have any opinion.
Well, hold on a minute. It's all about incumbent. We all agree there. They're both parties. We're not telling tales out of school here, guys.
Incumbents are drawing the lines. So.
Yeah, So they're going to protect them. But in all candor, there are 3 congressional districts that really, if you're a Republican, you got to look at to really try to protect. One is Lou Barletta up in the Northeast.
Correct.
For most of our viewers, that'd be Scranton and Wilkes-Barre.
Right.
Scranton and Luzerne.
That's right.
Scranton and Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne and Lackawanna. Then you got 2 districts down in the Philadelphia suburbs,
Pat
right?
Meehan seat is one, which is down in Delaware County.
And Fitzpatrick, Mike Fitzpatrick.
And there's the other one, there's another Republican seat there.
Well, that's the old Gerlach seat.
Gerlach.
Have a Gerlach seat down there.
Jim Gerlach is more vulnerable than Fitzpatrick.
Although he won larger last time than he did in the previous ones.
But here's the point. Down in the southeast, the formerly Republican area, down where you live, has now gotten to be more Democratic, right? So the whole point of this is, if you're a Republican, you've got to do something, Jim Redmond, about holding on to those seats, don't you?
Sure.
Well, you can do it easily. All you got to do is run the Delaware County seat out into Chester County and run the Montgomery County seat.
Lehigh Valley.
Yes, you run them away and you take those areas that are more likely to vote Democratic, like
tougher and tougher
Upper
to do,
Darby and Melbourne, and you put them into the Democratic seat.
And that's what we expect to see.
But we're not likely to see that plan until after the first of the year, from what I understand.
But the maps are out for the House and Senate districts. The maps are out now. They're published. They were published this week.
All right. Now, we've talked about the legislative ones before. Jim Redmond brought up a good point. Plans out there. Do any of you think that it's the basic outlines of the legislative redistricting will change? You get a yes or no?
No.
No? No. No? You agree?
I don't know.
No, you don't know. But it was a 3-2 vote on the commission, likely to stay that way, right?
Yeah.
All right. Final word on this, congressional redistricting. The Republicans control the process. That's just the way it is. Do any of you believe that they're likely to merge more than 2 sets of Democrats? The way it is now, it looks like Mark Kritz and Jason Altmaier in the western part of the state. Do any of you think that the Republicans will be bold and try to force 2 other sets of Democrats to run against each other? Do you think that?
No.
Because incumbent?
Incumbent protection.
Yep.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. They tried that 10 years ago, and it failed on them.
They created 2 new seats, but they made vulnerable their seats in the Philadelphia suburbs. Is that right?
Considering the overall registration in the state, the Republicans ought to be overjoyed with 12 Republicans and 6 Democrats. It doesn't match the population or the registration in the state.
That's right. A million registered, about a million more Democrats registered, but the Republicans hold 12 seats. We got 35 seconds. Is that the best the Republicans can hope to do?
Probably. I mean, of course, they also have, you know, the House, the Senate, the governor, so that, as you point out, they've done pretty well.
Yeah, particularly with the 2010 election. All right, we're out of time. I want to thank for great update. We'll get you back in the spring when they get going. I'm going to see if your predictions were right. We're going to weigh in and see if your predictions were right. All right, we'll see you next week. Guess what? Special interview Thanksgiving weekend with the governor of the state of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. You got to catch that one. See you next week.